My name is Mike Roberts. I'm the founder of San Diego Code School and creating coding careers. I'm a board member of San Diego JavaScript, longtime software engineer, been coding for about 31 years. And so hopefully I can shed a little bit of light on some resume tips, things that I look for as a hiring manager, as well as things I just think in general are best practices. And then towards the end, I'll show a few examples of resumes that I think are good resumes of early career developers, and then answer any questions that you guys have. So because there's just a few of you, you may be able to kind of monopolize and get lots of your questions answered. And hopefully this is just an effective resource or services resource for you to get just a little bit better at reviewing your resume and making sure you're putting your best foot forward. So with that said, here are a couple of the things I think are super important, and I think the resume is on the top of the list, but it's not the only piece that you should have available when you're thinking about how do I put my best foot forward, tell my message, and explain to folks why I'm the best candidate for a particular job. I think as a software engineer, the other three pieces are just as critical, and you want to have links to them on your resume. This is also in somewhat the order that I usually recommend that you sort of polish them. First and foremost, you need your resume because that's just sort of the calling card. What we do in this industry is ask people for resumes and share them. On that, you should have those links, but then separately, you should go in and you should really optimize your profile on LinkedIn. So I could do a whole other separate talk on that, maybe I will, but the idea is that you should have a link and it should represent pretty much the same information in maybe a slightly different form factor. Your GitHub is super important. You want to get those green streaks. So you want to show that you're a coder, that you're coding every day, that you enjoy doing it as a hobby, as well as you have meaningful projects on there that demonstrate your skill set and what you're passionate about, right? You should have some passion projects on there that demonstrate your skill set. And then finally, and I think this is the least important, is your portfolio. You should have a centralized place where you have your code, but frankly, like some of the best developers that I know, folks that write books about JavaScript, teach courses about JavaScript, have very vanilla looking portfolios, but each of the links in the site itself that it takes you to is where the magic is. So I wouldn't invest a ton of time trying to put together a super souped up version of your portfolio with, parallax and marquees and all kinds of fanciness. At the end of the day, people just want to see what it is that you work on and what's the quality and the level of your abilities at this point. So I keep that in mind. On your resume itself, the one thing I will usually caution people as you think about your resume as it's kind of like that business card or your calling card, that it's not likely to win you a job, but it can eliminate you from a job. So the first and foremost thing that you should have in your mind is making sure that you don't have misspellings, right? You want to have big waves of people going over it over and over and over again, especially if you're like me and you're terrible at spelling, so that you can catch those and not be able to, always put your best foot forward, not be able to fall into that trap of not paying attention to details and therefore missing an opportunity, because that's required when you're doing software engineering. The second big pitfall I see a lot of people want to cram a bunch of information into a small space, thinking that the more that they talk, the more they'll be able to sort of like expose all the facets of what they do. And the reality is most hiring managers and just people in general like to scan when they read. So you should be able to scan your resume and pick up the key points very quickly. If you can't scan your resume visually and very quickly pick out the key points, then you need to go back and keep working on it, keep massaging it. So you want to be able to see very clearly what the individual's work history is. I always tell people to line up the dates so that I can very quickly do the math in my head and I can figure out if there are any gaps. How long are the gaps? How long are you at each place? It's not relevant whether it's like a coding job or it's a job in an unrelated discipline. I just want to pick up on the pattern as quickly as I can. Do I see gaps? Do I see an area where it doesn't make sense? And if so, then I'm just looking to understand that story. And so if you need to explain your story, then you're either going to do that in your cover letter or you're just going to demonstrate it elsewhere, right? But I would avoid fancy and fluff in terms of you can make a super polished looking, photographic representation type resume where it's super pretty and it's got 2/3 columns and graphics, charts, lots of color. Those are all fine. But if you're going for like a full stack position or a backend position, that might work against you because you may not be able to demonstrate all your skills within that format. If you're looking for more of a front-end position, if you want to work on like high-end user experience, then that might be to your benefit. So play towards your strengths. If that's the kind of role, then maybe you do want that more high-end. And then you might want to have an alternative text-only version of your resume as well. And then the last thing is, don't have a bunch of pictures or like illustrations of yourself, memes, things like that. It's still considered kind of like a taboo here in the US to have pictures of yourself on your resume. So I would try and avoid doing that altogether. As far as things that you should, and I encourage on your resume, try and be authentic and transparent about what your experience is. And so if you have more experience in another domain, it's fine to talk about that so that you can share with the person, like, this is your current skill set and your background. And these are the transferable skills that would make you a good software developer or a good fit for a particular role. And in some cases, you might have to get like multiple versions of your resume that sort of craft that message for different opportunities. So you want to not lie or mislead, because as soon as someone figures out, that's it, they're not going to hire you. So do be super transparent. Also try and use facts rather than generalities. So instead of talking about qualities, talk about very specific things like, I designed a system that increased conversion rates by 5%, that resulted in people going further through a sales funnel on a particular web page, right? So talk specifically about the impact that your experience has had on businesses and the types of ROI that you've been able to create. And so that can be difficult if it's not directly in technology, because you may be transitioning in. But again, think about what transferable skills, what things from your background are you going to bring with you to the table and make you a better candidate than somebody else. So that's part of telling your story, right? Within that space, you want to use the canvas that you have to talk about why this, and this skill set are relevant for the job that you're applying for. What I try and help people try and avoid as well is like putting that up at the very top is like this beefy paragraph of text. But instead, it should be scannable. It should be very easy to tell, like, what is this unique value? Some people call it your superpower. So be clear. Tell people right up front, my superpower is, in my case, my superpower is identifying talent and helping them get ready for day one on the job. So if you need to, again, craft different messages for different audiences. You can have more than one resume. There's no rule that says you can only use one, and that's the one you can give to everybody. You want to keep track of what you sent so that you'll know, like, when they follow up with you, which version of it they got, so that you're not giving them like another version when you show up in person. And then please make sure that you're getting it reviewed, that you're going through waves of review and getting feedback, because there's always something that someone might view differently, and that might shape how you might want to make some small tweaks or adjustments. In terms of tools, people always ask, is there like some kind of website that I can go to that's going to help me optimize or make my resume better? There is one that you can use for like keywords, and that's jobscan.co. So that will basically parse your resume the same way the search engines that are on the recruiting sites do, and look for keywords, and it will tell you, like, this is how your resume would match up against this particular job. So it'll give you sort of that comparison of like, if this is the job post and this is your resume, you're well aligned, or like you're not aligned and you're probably just going to get filtered out by the automatic mechanisms. The other two tools are for making your resume look pretty. So again, you can get away with perfectly fine with using Word or using like Google Docs and just creating a text version. But if you want something that looks a little bit more like visually appealing, then Canva or Visual CV are some other tools as well. So I'm going to pause here and show you guys a few resumes that I think are decent. And give me 1 second here. All right, so can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So this one I think is a pretty good example of the types of content. It's a little bit less scannable than I'd like. One of the things that I very quickly could help or that would make it easier would be, instead of having everything underlined, maybe just like some very specific things like the statement, the projects, and then education, and not underline the other things. That would cut down a little bit. but it's pretty clear that the first section and the thing that the person is trying to sort of like humble brag about is projects that they've done, right? And so I always suggest putting the strongest evidence that you have that you're a fit for the role towards the top, and then you have your weakest arguments towards the bottom. That way, if they don't get to the bottom, they've already gotten the best of what you have to offer, right? And there's a chance that they'll just kind of look at the first few things and decide, this isn't worth my time to read the rest of it. So this has got a lot of dense text. It might be better to thin this out a little bit, but I like the fact that there's a ton of projects on here. There's a link to get to more projects on here. Keep in mind, someone might be reading this on a piece of paper, so you can't use shortened links, or you can't use links that are just like obfuscated. People have to actually be able to type it out. So don't put like, click here, and then bury it as a URL link. This person went through a code academy, took some online classes, and then, interesting, went to law school. So this is something that sometimes people like will say, oh, well, this isn't relevant. Should I include this? Should I not include it? I think this is great. The person has a law degree that shows that they've got some dedication. They can think logically and they can reason. And so this is a pretty good like sign that they potentially could be a good fit in a software engineering role. You've got some work experience below that. So I think it makes sense, the order on this one as well, that the strongest evidence that this person might be a good fit for a role are the projects that they worked on. The second is the fact that they have a bachelor's degree and a law degree and some very specific training going through an immersive boot camp. So a lot of the skills that I think would get this person to at least be a candidate for a phone screening. Any questions about this resume before I jump on to show you guys another example?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So it looks like the resume is, I couldn't tell when you were scrolling, but it looks like 2 pages long, or is it 3? 2 pages, okay.
Looks like it's at least 2 pages. Yeah, actually 3 pages.
3 pages, okay. In my experience, that sounds a little long for a resume.
Sure.
Do you usually advise people to keep it a little bit shorter?
No, all depends on your experience. And so I would say someone making a transition from a law degree to software, first of all, I'm not sold on the objective statement. It's interesting. The person wants to hit the ground, creating innovative websites and applications, but that seems kind of fluffy to me. I would have loved to see like solving problems in technology in the law, right? Or technology in the court system, right? Because then I could see tying it together like, oh, that's probably a real passion or a real cause of this person, right? So again, it works for this particular individual. I think this individual, if I'm remembering correctly, built a final project for like Hewlett Packard and ended up getting hired by Hewlett Packard, and they gave him a bunch of money to build some sort of a case management software system. And so it was a successful resume, but I think it could have been even more successful if that mission had been right up front, right? It is kind of here with this project, so you have to kind of read into the project to remember, like that's how I kind of clued in on this. But if he had just said like, hey, I've got experience in law, I want to apply my passion for technology to solve problems in the legal profession, much more compelling objective. And then you want to justify it by showing you got 2 pages of experience in the legal profession. And I think that's perfectly fine. The area that you want to be cautious about in terms of the pages is, do the pages add value? And do they demonstrate the skill set that you have? And if it takes 3 pages to talk about your skills, great. Now, if it takes more than that and they're not directly related to what your goal is, I'd say probably not relevant. So you could probably leave them off, right? When you get to that page 3 and you're at the bottom, you probably can just like draw a line and stop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay. I have a question about, as you know, I'm transitioning into tech. And so should I kind of give an explanation on my summary statement as, how I'm applying for a software developer, even though I don't have any experience on my resume related to that?
I don't think it's necessary. That might be something you want to touch on in a cover letter. You can sort of talk about like why you're making a transition and why you're passionate about it. But when people are making a hire decision, they really should be basing it on what are your job relevant skills. And so it shouldn't be based on the gap, right? It's just part of telling your narrative that you want to focus on like what skills you have. versus the timing issue, if that makes sense. So I try and avoid timing issues on your resume. It usually is self-apparent when you're looking at a junior engineer's resume, like, oh, they're early career, so they don't expect you to have a lot of experience, right? Because you're at the beginning of your career. Makes sense. But I just wouldn't stress over not having that and feel like you need to, like, in this case, add 2 more pages of work history, but it ties in well, given if you make that last little adjustment, which is a more clear objective statement.
Okay.
Cool. Next up, we've got Jeff Ward. So this one I think is a little prettier, right? So he went the extra mile and sort of used the strike table and broke out his skill set. This might get scanned and these might show up. He also sort of gave himself a rating for most of these, which is fine. I think it's a good way to sort of be self-aware and identify there are places where you could get stronger. Still somewhat not a great like objective statement. I think it's okay, but it's kind of like fluffy and not like very specific. Jeff Ward was a model and took a boot camp and then went on to get like a 6-figure offer and transitioned from being a model to being a software engineer. But you can't find that here. And so I, having known his story, understand that, but that's a piece that isn't really shared here because he doesn't talk about how he was a model, right? He lists some work experience. The dates are a little harder to follow here. It looks like there's some overlap, but he doesn't rely on that. And so you can also maybe leave out references will be provided. That's kind of already stated or kind of understood. So use that real estate to talk more about maybe your projects. Instead of having 2 lines about your projects, dig in a little bit and talk about like what were the exciting parts of the projects? What did you enjoy learning about the project that you used? If you built a brackets extension, so brackets is an IDE, what problem were you trying to solve? Like why did you need to build this extension? And was there nothing out on the marketplace? That shows me like, oh, there was nothing on the marketplace. You decided to build a tool for people that write code. That's awesome. You're not really singing that achievement in this particular example. Any other questions, comments, or concerns about this one?
I have a general comment or a question about projects.
Sure.
So I don't have a background in software engineering or tech. I'm also looking to transition, and I'm coming from the nonprofit world. I have a background in nonprofit management development specifically. And I recently completed front-end master's bootcamp.
Okay.
And so if I wanted to include that on my resume, this is like my first, voyage into coding. And could I include the website that I created as a project? Like I created basically the overall assignment for the bootcamp was create a website all about you. So it has several pages and different projects on the website. Most of which was coded from scratch. Some of the things they were trying to convey complex ideas, and so they weren't necessarily coded from scratch, but we went through it line by line as a class. So would a portfolio website be something that I can include under the category of project? Or
Sure. I think a lot of folks will include that. The key is going to be to really, like, I think even in your hesitation about asking and about like, does this count? You're sort of getting the code smell, if you will, that a hiring manager will look at and say, okay, well, you follow the course, you built this website. So what is special about that experience? What did you do? What was the seasoning that you added that wasn't part of the curriculum? And as long as you highlight those points, then again, you can mark that as a win and you move on, right? Maybe create a couple other really small projects, things that you can complete in 2 or 3 days. And again, use something that is like exciting to you or interesting to you. You're solving some problem that's relevant to you to demonstrate your passion for coding. That's what people are hiring for. They're hiring for grit. They're hiring for communication skills. They're hiring for teamwork. They're not hiring for a very specific framework or a tool or a library, right? So just, I think, keep that in mind. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to show a fancier one. So this might be for a developer that's looking at maybe more of a front end role. You want to show a little bit more polish. Um, he's given himself a little bit of bleed, if you know what that means. So when he prints these out, it should print right to the edge of the paper, and that should look really nice. Um, all the contact information is clear. It's a little harder to read all caps. So if there are things that you want people to type, it might be better to keep those like lowercase. Like the fact that he's listed some skills here. I hope that these are listed in like strongest to weakest. Couple projects that are here. Overall, I think this is about the right amount of information to be able to scan and understand what he has done. Right away, I picked up on a small inconsistency, and that is like a dash here and an equal sign here. So these types of things you got to catch when you're, this is a curly bracket and that's a straight bracket. You got to catch at the review phase. You can notice how quickly I picked up on it, and people will see that and say, attention to detail, maybe not the strongest person or the strongest skill set for this person. So those are kind of the big takeaways that I have with this one. It's about, like I said, the right amount of scanning. Again, profile doesn't give me much. This doesn't really tell me much about David. Again, I know where he ended up, and I don't think it was because of this resume. So he ended up at a pretty good sized organization, and then I think he went to Facebook after that, or Google. So super sharp candidate, but I'm not getting the sort of like passion and energy out of like the hardworking, quick learning adjectives that describe yourself. It's better to really, really focus in on like what makes your skill set different. Everyone's going to say they learn quick, they solve problems, they work hard. So, what's the evidence of that, right? Try and use that instead of fluffy here inside of your actual experience. Talk about how you created something that was innovative, right? Where in here, what's the innovative thing that you built? Any other questions, comments, concerns about this one? All right, last one I'm going to show as an example. This would be somebody that I would again think is looking for like a super like front end type role. Very interested in making something aesthetically pleasing. I like the fact that they didn't use this picture in here. I know there's a temptation a lot of times to throw your grill up on the front of your resume, but still super taboo, and I would avoid doing that. Little dense in terms of the amount of text that's in here, but I do like the fact that he's specifically called out the languages and frameworks that he's most comfortable with. Even though he put React under frameworks and React's not a framework, it's a library, we're gonna give a pass, right? So again, very quickly as you're scanning this as a hiring manager, you pick up on things like that and you're like, that's not good. You gotta like make sure those little details are super dialed in. Any questions, comments, concerns? Sweet. I either did a fantastic job or you guys are super shy today.
Quick question about the skills and the languages and libraries and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's covered on the San Diego Code School program. So like, should I mention everything that we have learned, or should I maybe highlight the most important things? What's your recommendation on that?
Okay, so my take on the skills, the things that you're going to highlight are gonna mainly be around, let me just move this out of the way here, sorry. Are gonna be mainly around things like, what do you feel most comfortable with? What do you feel strong with? Sometimes people will say, I know PHP, but I hate it. I don't want a PHP job. Like, well, then don't list it as your skills on your resume, right? Because then people are going to see that and they're going to think you enjoy working in it. So like, let me reach out and see if he likes this gig. So I would definitely shy away from the just throwing everything on there. I would organize it in the areas where you feel like you have the strongest skill set. Things that you feel strong about should be closer to the top. Things that are not your strongest suit, you can move towards the bottom, or you can eliminate if there's just a lot there, So pick and choose, really highlight the things that you feel are the strongest about. And again, be aware that if you put it at the top, that's the first thing they're going to ask you. Oh, I see HTML, CSS. And you're like, yeah, I don't like front end. I only like coding on the back end. Like, well, why did you list it as your first skill then? Right.
Yeah.
So, does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. What else?
I'm concerned that my statement is not strong enough. Like I'm trying, so yeah, that's something that I need to work on. Maybe I'm not tying enough the past with the future, basically. So
sure. So like one thing you can do is just ask the community, post it in like the Slack channel looking for work and say, hey, like some of you guys know me, so this is what I'm thinking. How would you guys, feel like I could better describe myself? Or what are the areas you think I'm missing? Or, what are your thoughts on this? Get some people to help you with wordsmithing. I know it's really hard sometimes to think of the right words or to think of the right way to kind of like explain it.
yes.
And it's okay. This is not like it's not cheating, right? When you have other people help you out, then that's perfectly fine. You want something that represents where you're currently at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
What else? Anything else?
Does it look odd these days because so many people just assume everyone has these skills? But so is it not good to include things like proficiencies in Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Google Suite, things like that people kind of take for granted that we already have those skills?
I mean, depending on the role you're going after, you could incorporate those. I think for a lot of the software engineering roles, they're going to assume that you're able to quickly pick up those kinds of tools, and that's not an area that they kind of just assume that you would be able to use the basic communication tools and frameworks. You might want to mention the project management tools that you're familiar with. So if you've used like Asana or Jira or GitHub projects, you could talk about the fact that you're familiar with those workflows and using those tools, that you've used them on X, Y, or Z projects. That could be helpful, right? But I agree. I think that if your premise was that you're not sure if you should include them, you probably have greater skills that you could include that would like be more relevant for what you're trying to. Now, if there's a specific role where they said, hey, part of your job is going to be an analyst, and then the other half of it is going to be, you're going to be like customizing solutions or querying a database. And so we want someone with maybe some more technical skills, but able to clearly, get things into PowerPoint presentations and, clearly technically communicate. And these are the tools that we use. And sure, you could talk about it and talk about the fact that you're very proficient, you're a power user in Microsoft Office, X, Y, and Z.
Okay. Really tailoring it to each opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely. What else?
So say that our skill set is pretty limited and we do want to remove some things that we don't feel comfortable with from our resume. What if there's only 5 or 6 things that we feel really strong about? Do we include, some things that we're not so good at anyway to just kind of be filler? Or do we just...
It's hard to say. It's kind of subjective, but I would say if you feel like there are areas where you feel sort of like they're not your strengths, but they're not like super big weaknesses, then it's sort of like, sure, you may put them on there. That might be an opportunity you're looking forward to, tackling and learning. Like, hey, I would take a job where I had to do a little bit more CSS work, even though I don't feel like that's my strong suit, right? So you wouldn't say it on the resume, but you might say, your last skill might be CSS. And if I saw that, I'd be like, oh, okay, so Kano doesn't want to work on the front end. He basically wants like a back end position, or he wants to work primarily in HTML and JavaScript, right? And that's fine. Like they could see that just by the order that you rank things, and it becomes very apparent. Like, oh, okay, that's either going to fit for this role or it's not going to fit. So I wouldn't think about it in terms of like fluff or filling it. I would think about it as like, would you take a job where that skill set was required? And if so, sort of prioritize it where it is. And if you definitely wouldn't, if you're like, I don't want to do any CSS, then don't put it on there, right?
Gotcha.
Like,
okay, that makes sense.
I'm not a CSS guy. Great. You can put in there all your JavaScript skills, and like, maybe that's a good fit for the role.
Okay, cool.
Not to pick on your CSS skills. I don't know where your CSS skills are. So I don't want to imply.
That's all right. I didn't take it personally.
Any other questions? All right.
I'm sorry.
What? Go ahead.
Going back to that last resume, I just want to go over his objective real quick. I don't know if you still have the ability to pull it up.
I might, or it might be completely gone.
Okay, no worries if not. But I just wanted to know like your thoughts on it because it seemed like, you know, a little bit of hardworking, quick learning.
Yeah.
Terms similar to that were thrown around, and it's like, well, if you're in a junior position, I get you don't. It should be assumed that you are going to be hardworking,
Yeah.
but if you
like, who's gonna apply for a job and be like, yeah, I'm not hardworking, like I'm slow.
yeah, exactly. It's like that kind of goes without saying. So
Right.
I just wanted your thoughts on what his objective said. It wasn't those exact words, but I just want to see like
Yeah,
kind of do something like
thinking
that.
back, I think it was a little long, right? There was a lot there, right? And
Mhm.
it could have been said much more succinctly. Also, it was just a little like, it was just vanilla and didn't show me anything about like, what is this person's passion? Are they really a coder? Like, if they were stuck all weekend at home, would they spend the time coding, or would they spend the time watching videos on YouTube? Right.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so if I got the impression, oh no, like they would be coding, I'm sure they would build something super interesting and be like wanting to share it on Monday and like let the whole world know, like, this is a pretty cool project that I worked on and like, here it is. That's the feeling that you want to have as a hiring manager when you're at the top of the resume. You're looking like they're on your side. They want you to be a fit. They want you to like, I want to fill this role. So you start checking the boxes at the very beginning when you're like, I'm passionate about coding. I have experience using X, Y, and Z. I love the technology that you guys use. Like, if all of those things resonate, it's like, all right, cool. This is a win. Like, let's bring them in. Let's have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If they immediately see red flags, things that are inconsistent, they see things that just seem like they're just fluff, then they're more likely to be like, like, there's nothing interesting here. You just go into another stack and they keep going through the stack, right?
Mm-hmm.
The process happens that quickly. People are going to have big stacks of resumes and they're quickly trying to weed through it and figure out like, who do we need to talk to, who do we not? And like, just literally like ranking it. And if you get put to the bottom of the pack, it's not good. You're probably not going to get a call. You're probably not going to get an interview.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get a call. This is like, that's the key objective. So think about it from the perspective of you're engineering a solution. The solution you want to engineer is getting a call back to have a conversation. So you want to give them enough that they feel comfortable investing 20 minutes having a call with you. That's really all it is, right? They just have to feel like, as they read the resume, like everything just has to check. They don't have to be like, wow, like, let me put everything down right now and call this person. They just have to be like, yep. Okay, cool. This goes in the like, want to have conversation pile. If things are like, like, no, like, I don't know, this is maybe, it goes into like later. If we get through this entire stack and there's nothing left over, then we'll go back over here and like take another look. You don't want to be in that pile. Or the like no attention to detail. There's spelling mistakes. This goes out and in the trash can. Like, there's not even a second look.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
okay,
that's the process that you want to use as a new developer. Later on, when you have more to put on there, more substance, then it's just dialing it in even more and optimizing it even more. But early on, I tell people, like, don't invest like in an inordinate amount of time, like trying to process this and think it through. Just grade it by, these are the projects, get people to review it, give you some feedback, optimize, work through that feedback, and then keep it moving. Move on to your projects, move on to your GitHub, move on to your LinkedIn.
okay.
That make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Who will be reviewing our resumes or and our applications for the apprenticeship program? Is it does that include the employers that will be participating in the program, or?
Yeah, so primarily the employer for at this point is going to be the nonprofit. So that means basically me, right? So we are both the employer as well as we have one entity that's the employer as well as one that sponsors the program. And so the same committee that reviews you for acceptance to the program is the one that you're going to be working for.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not like a separate entity, if that makes sense. Okay. So I'll be looking at resumes. I'm sure Margaret and Wes will be looking at resumes as well. The rest of the leadership team at San Diego Code School.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Do you have any recommendations on the cover letters?
Sure. I really want just sort of like a brief introduction as to, like, for example, like why you're interested in attending or participating in the apprenticeship opportunity, why you think you might be a good fit. And those are typically the questions that you'd want to have on any cover letter, right? Something about, why are you interested? Tell me about, why this makes sense in terms of an opportunity for you. And it's your opportunity to, at that point, maybe tell your unique story that's not captured in your resume.
Yeah.
This is the part where you can kind of craft the message and create some like excitement about what you're about to see, which is like all of my, accomplishments and the projects and the technical things. But here's why it matters. Here's where I am as a unique individual.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be long. It could just be a couple sentences. What does this opportunity mean to you? What would you do with it? How would it impact your life? Why are you like coding right now? Those are all great questions to be answering with that opportunity.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? These are all great questions. I'm glad that you guys are asking them. Awesome. I'm going to let you guys go. If you have more questions and you're just feeling shy, you can send me a DM on Slack, or you can email me at mike@sdcs.io. And I look forward to hopefully having you submit an application with a resume and a cover letter and using all these tips. It'll help. Awesome. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day, Mike.